We're here today with Art Levine, president of the Woodrow Wilson Foundation. Hi Art, thanks for joining us here at the Chronicle.
It's always nice to be with you.
We're glad to have you. The reason we have you here today is because you're just announced the new Woodrow Wilson Academy for Teaching and Learning at MIT. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But it strikes me that this is a little bit of a put up or shut up moment for you. You've been writing about teacher education now for 5 or 10 years, identifying some of the faults. I think you've in the past have said some of the training has ranged from inadequate to appalling, kind of a. So what does this moment mean for you right now with the launching of this new academy?
I think this is real different than anything we've ever done before. And as opposed to saying, let's make what we're doing better, what we're saying this time is the whole world changed. And no matter how good whatever we had in the past was, it's now out of date. And we need to create something dramatically different, an education for the 21st century. And that's something that we haven't discussed before, and that's probably the largest challenge we've ever faced.
And for you, you've been pretty vocal critic. Sometimes I've taken some grief for some of that. I mean, maybe less. Well, yeah, maybe more, maybe not so much grief. But what does this mean for you right now? Are you feeling that this is your chance to kind of prove yourself, or?
You know, I've sort of had a chance to do that for a while. When I first got to Woodrow Wilson, what we did was we thought, okay, anybody can throw bricks. Can you fix it? And so we started at Woodrow Wilson creating state-based teacher education programs. So the idea was you'd create a fellowship in a state, and then what would happen is you'd go create a coalition of all the major political leaders. Then you'd go recruit really strong people to go become STEM teachers in high-need schools. But the next part was you'd go work with universities to transform their teacher education programs. And we've ended up working with 33 universities in 5 states. And the one thing that came out of that we learned was teacher education programs can be strong. Universities can create them.
So
they can attract strong students.
So why do this? You've got it.
Because what we're basically saying now is it's really important to be able to repair them. But what's critical at this point is you really need to reinvent them because they're premised upon a model that doesn't work anymore. And the real difficulty, it's not something that pertains to ed schools alone. The real difficulty is, look, our country's changing. We're going from this national analog industrial economy to a global digital information economy in every one of our social institutions, whether it's government or schools or your business, media, or healthcare. They're all created for the former. And what you got to do is try to fix them. And there are 2 ways in which they need to be fixed. One's immediate, which is we got to make what we got better than it is now. And that's what we've been working at. But then there's the next step, which is we really need to reinvent it for a global digital information economy. And an example of that is we're building competency-based programs. And that sounds real jargony.
Yeah, actually, your program, I was going through the list, you hit every buzzword in there: competency-based, open source, assessments. You know, you've hit all the buzzwords. I think the only one you don't have is big data in there.
Oh, nuts. I don't know how we missed that one. But even so, I mean, the notion, I hate the fact that competency has become such a buzzword. What we're really saying is, look, the way education has worked historically is that all we focused on was time. Seat time, how many years you had to study, how many courses you had to take, how many credits you had to accumulate. It was all about how long you were taught at. And we're saying that really doesn't matter. What matters is, what's the student learn? And what we're doing with this is saying...
Why is that particularly important in teacher education?
I think it's important in everything, not just teacher education. But as opposed to saying, gee, if you have 36 hours and you have X number of hours in the classroom, you're capable of being a teacher. That's just not true.
Do you think some of the teacher education programs right now are just too reliant on, I mean, there's a lot of questions about whether they're strong enough. They're just too much about time and not enough about quality?
Sure, they're too much about time, not enough about what you learned. The key is, look, what do you have to be able to know and be able to do if you're going to be a good entering teacher? And then the question becomes, look, do you have those skills, do you have that knowledge? And rather than saying you took a bunch of courses, what we're saying is in this program, you achieved every one of those skills and all of that knowledge, and you're now fit to be a teacher. Given who you are, Maybe you could do that in a few weeks. Given who I am, this could take years. But the fact is, we each advance at our own rate. And the notion behind it would be mastery. You have to master the outcomes.
So one of the other things that I found kind of very intriguing about this is the open source element of it. Your idea is to try to, I guess, use this, this academy and also the research that takes place at the academy to inform the field. How do you, why is that even important?
Because I think today there are lots and lots of hothouse experiments going on in education. And that doesn't have a lot of interest. The real question is, how do you affect policy and how do you affect practice? So the thing we're putting together has two parts. One part is a graduate school that offers programs in school leadership and teaching, and the other one's a laboratory. And what the laboratory does is study what works, okay? So if you take the first piece and you say, all right, why would you make that open source? The answer is, so any university in the United States can take all of it, they can take part of it, but they can adopt it. The idea is make this thing adoptable.
Do people really want to adopt your stuff? Aren't they very happy just working with what they have? That's why there are all these programs right now.
But what if you could show that it worked? I mean, try to imagine this, okay? You create a class, and a third of it looks like Teach for America, and a third of it looks like Career Changers, and a third of it looks like traditional ed school students. And they go through this program. How long do they take to graduate? Do they graduate? Once they're in a classroom, what's achievement look like in their classes? Do these people stay in the profession? If you can get all that data together, the goals are really twofold. One is feed it to universities and say, look, here's what we know. Here's a showroom. Take anything you like from this showroom, give them what we know. The other thing is take everything we've learned, and not so much publish it in the journal, get it into the hands of governors, legislators, chief state school officers, state higher education executive officers who are hungry to figure out how to change teacher education and make it stronger. So the idea is get into the hands of policymakers and practitioners, and maybe you can create broader scale change.
Why this one versus all the other school programs that are out there right now? There's a lot of really innovative things happening right now in teacher education. Maybe not at the scale that you want, but certainly they're out there. Why? Who needs your school, really?
Oh yeah, well, oh yeah. I think what's really behind this is the notion that this one really is different. This is an entirely different model. And again, we're back to the word competency, but it's outcome-based. This is very, very different. I think you're going to see that it looks different technologically. It's going to look different in terms of the kinds of instruction.
Oh yeah, that was the other word that I was missing, hybrid instruction. That's a big one in there too, right?
Glad we didn't leave that one out.
Assessment also was, and a different kind of faculty.
Except that's what it's really about, which is, okay, so you got these competencies, okay, it's a list of the things you got to know and be able to do. So what I got to be able to do is figure out where you stand on all those things, and lo and behold, the name for that's assessment. And then once we've assessed where you are, we've got to provide something to help to get to where you need to go, and those are the hybrid modules, or whatever we call them. They're instructional units that are tied to the competencies, and the idea is, as opposed to simply saying you get 3 credits, you show up 15 weeks, we do an hour a day for 3 days. What we're saying here is, look, all we care is that at the end of this, you know how to manage a class.
Is there something today, we're doing this interview 2015, you have been writing about this for 10 years at least. Is there something in the environment right now you think that will make this more easily accepted by the academy, by people?
Yeah, I do. I think a bunch of things are happening right now. One is I've never had the sense of pressure on the part of policymakers. They want this thing to be better, and they're hungry for solutions. The other thing that's happened is that universities are feeling real pressure to begin to do a better job, and the other thing that's happening is all kinds of providers who aren't universities are really getting into teacher education, and whether it's charter schools, or it's for-profit companies, or it's new organizations, they're all getting into this area. So it's becoming much more competitive, and they need to do it better. And I think the other piece is, when I talked a little while ago about society going from industrial to information, industrial societies are all about fixed process and fixed time. Information economies are all about outcomes. And in a very real sense, what we've done is we've tapped into where the society is moving. We have standards in schools. We're going to move to standards in higher education. And that's all we've done. I think it's the right move at the right time.
I know when you look at the teaching profession overall, we need about 1.5 billion new teachers over the next decade. There's a lot of reasons teachers don't go into the field: low pay, low status. How can this really help some of those issues?
I can't help with all those issues. I mean, fact is, this won't change the salaries. This won't change the pension funds. The one thing it might do is attract some really strong people to this profession and give them a stronger education they've had in the past. With our other programs, the one thing we found was that if you give them really good mentoring and you give them a really good education, some very bright people teaching in high-need schools will really stay on. After 4 years in our other programs, we still have an 81% retention rate. We can do those kinds of things. We can make those the norms and show why they're the norms. The whole emphasis here is really on, can you change practice at scale by showing how it works? Can you give a showroom to all of teacher education about how to do it? And people are talking about things like competencies and blended programs and hybrid programs and assessment. They're too hard to do. But imagine if you could see it at work and decide that you want to do it after seeing it. And that's really what we're hoping for.
Right. And you mentioned the word scale, which is, I guess, that last buzzword which we hadn't hit so far, which is, I guess, an important part of this.
Thank God we didn't leave out a buzzword.
Right, that's good. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been a nice conversation.
For me too. Thanks, Colby.
Thanks a lot.